What potential challenges do you foresee in implementing MCP, and how might developers mitigate those challenges?
I think exactly that challenge that people will run into is like, I don't think that there are any mental models around this. There's no guidance around this is how you do authentication in MCP. These are the types of problems. This is the type of access controls that you're going to want to have. And that I think is something that as a developer, there are situations, or if you're writing an MCP server, maybe you want to expose only read-only things in a certain context, or to expose the read-write things. And how do you kind of do the segregation? The LLM knows that certain things it can do, other things it can't do, or depending on which context it's in, and I don't know. And then maybe the LLM doesn't understand. It has a tool call that it can make, it tries to do it, and it's oh, this didn't work. And it's I don't know why it didn't work. I've played with Claude, and with Claude, with the MCP integration, anytime that you want to make a tool call, it basically either asks for general approval for the rest of this chat, or a one-off approval. But it feels like something that should be more pluggable. This isn't a very mature thought. When I was playing with it, there was a situation where I wanted to allow it to make a tool call, and I was well, right now I want to let it do this, and maybe in the future I want to let it do it too, but I don't know. And so I kind of had this trade-off between, well, should I do it only now for this call, or should I do it for all future calls? And so the pluggability, is I think again this comes down to contexts, or what exactly it is that you're trying to do in the tool call. Maybe if you're trying to do exactly the same tool call again with the same arguments, then that should be fine. But if you're changing arguments or something like that, or maybe the tool call can kind of make a decision, do I need to get permission for this action? Or can I run if you did the same tool call 2 minutes ago or similar, then maybe that's fine. But if it's more than 10 minutes ago, then you would need to get approval again. And it didn't feel like there's a way for, I don't know, I actually didn't look into it, but if there's a way for, as a developer, to kind of to control how this authorization thing works. I don't think that you see anything about it. Basically, it all happens in the Claude interface, and you don't.
Well, security and compliance auditing and so on is paramount here. One thing that I would be concerned about is at some point we would not fully understand what these MCP tools are doing. And again, that would raise another level of questions, compliance and so on. Not necessarily observability. Observability gives you traces of what happened. It's understanding what code inside these MCPs is doing, how it interacts with large language model, what actual vulnerabilities or abuse of systems can happen there. Think about security, then you develop your tools. Well, specific security is if you give in large language model for MCP unfiltered access to SQL prompt, to Flash prompt, obviously exposing yourself to a whole bunch of potential attacks. Some of them we don't even know about yet. Restrict what the MCP server, MCP tool can do to the absolute bare minimum that is required to achieve the goal. It can be on multiple levels, but let's take SQL, for example, right? You can start with giving a tool or user admin rights and then see what you can disable so they can steal their job. Or you can start from the opposite way and say, you have no rights. Oh, you want to do this select. Okay, let me grant you permissions to do exactly that, right? And this way you have very tight, restricted permission boundary which this person or this tool can operate within. And it requires different level of fundamentals that you need to know if you write in code. 50 years ago, if you don't know assembler, you're not a developer, right? Then things like Visual Basic come along and so on. Right now, you need to know Python, Git, basic computer science algorithm and so on. Maybe 3-4 years down the road, you need to know the basic hygiene of letting LLM mess with functions and limitations plus tools that support you. Right now, if you don't use Git, people would look at you like, what are you doing, right? The next level is, do you use tests? This kind of thing. I don't know what the name or paradigm of that tool would be for MCP, but there would be something that you absolutely must do. You create these kind of tools if you create this kind of workflow. Obviously, you do have to test your code, right? On what level you do that? Are you just pre-record the prompts, ship it to your MCP server, see what the result would be? Would be maybe you would deploy small LLM that does basic interactions with it. But tests are essential. How exactly good tests for MCP do like today and would look like in half a year, we can guess, but we probably don't know what would be kind of the right tool set, right paradigm in the next little while. It's very actively evolving field. One thing I know and I use regularly is I ask LLM to help me to come up with the tests. Test data and so on.
Yeah.
That's been a huge time saver for me.
So the biggest one I ran into so far is that not all the clients support the entire spec. And so you kind of have to implement everything as a tool, because if you implement something as a resource or a prompt, well, maybe 1% of the clients can make use of it. So that's one thing. The debugging thing was a pain. Hopefully that will get easier. Hopefully more of them will support remote servers. Well, I mean, you can connect to this MCP server using the standard IO or over the server-side events HTTP. And at least right now, the easiest way for me to debug was to spin it up as a server that's running SSE protocol, then have the client connect so that I could have the server running in my debugger. Hopefully that'll get easier. I mean, a lot of the clients were really finicky about configuring the servers, but I'm sure that may be operator error. And I think there was some part of the spec where you can send completions, you can request the client to do completions for you. It'd be really nice, but again, I don't know. There may be like one client that supports that at the moment. I guess it's kind of like back in the browser days where like, I guess it's still around, where you have like the HTML spec or whatever, but only, IE part of it, and this one supports, and in SQL too, there are SQL standards, but Oracle supports this part, Postgres supports that part. So you can't really write standard SQL unless you limit yourself. Testing's hard too. Well, just in general with LLMs, you can't really expect a deterministic response. And so you can't say, well, I expect A, because sometimes it's AB. And so that makes it difficult. Do you just check that you got any response at all and it wasn't an error? Or do you do some kind of fuzzy string matching on your response? So like for text to SQL, you give a natural language query, you could get 1,000 different queries back to respond to that natural language question that would be correct. So you can't really check that the query is exactly this character by character, because there are a bunch of ways to express that query that would give you an accurate answer. You can't necessarily even check the answer. You could run your golden query and get the result. And unless like the columns are all aliased the same in the same order and your result rows are in the same order, you can't really exactly check that. So what I've found works the best so far is to ask an LLM. Here's the question I asked. The query I think is right, and its result. Here's the query that was provided. Its results. Are they good enough?